Just how rich is Joe Rogan? Be it the UFC, American television, or international podcasts, there is one name that never stays away from the spotlight: Joe Rogan. Many know him as the famous color commentator in UFC fights. Others know him from his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, on Spotify. One way or another, Rogan has established himself as one of the most recognized social media celebrities in the world. His podcast receives millions of viewers on each episode, and with that comes millions of dollars. Anyway, let's dive into the video, How Rich is Joe Rogan? But before we do that, we would really like it if you could click the like button to support the channel. Remember, we make these videos for free for your entertainment, and that is all we ask for in support. Hit the subscribe button while you're there too. All set? Let's look at how rich the podcast host is and how he spends his wealth. Joe Rogan was born in Newark, New Jersey in 1967. As a young child, he was fascinated by martial arts and wanted to be a kickboxer when he grew up. Today, the American has a history of participating in kickboxing as well as commentating on UFC fights. He also has a hugely popular podcast to his name. But what most people don't know about Joe Rogan is that the American didn't always have a net worth of $120 million. In fact, his childhood was pretty traumatizing. Rogan's parents got divorced when he was just 5 years old, and just 2 years later, his father walked out on him permanently. In an interview, Rogan spoke about his dad and said, "All I remember of my dad are these brief, violent flashes of domestic violence." That's a lot of bad childhood memories. Rogan moved to California with his mom and joined a local school. There, his interest in martial arts peaked. He participated in a number of Taekwondo tournaments, all while moving from place to place. He became so good at kickboxing that he even won the US Open Championship Taekwondo tournament at the age of 19. Eventually, Rogan settled in Massachusetts and his life finally moved into second gear: stand-up and acting career. Joe Rogan had a special love for comedy and also had good comic timing. His friends encouraged him to do stand-up comedy, and eventually he gave in and moved to New York to become a comedian. His first break, though, came in Los Angeles in 1994. Rogan appeared on national television when he booked his spot for a popular MTV show called Half Hour Comedy Show. He was considered a success, and not long after, he signed a contract with the sitcom Hardball. In 1995, he signed for the NBC sitcom News Radio, which lasted for 4 years. But perhaps Rogan's biggest hit on television came in 2001 thanks to NBC. He accepted an offer from the broadcaster to host the American version of the show Fear Factor. Rogan hosted the show from 2001 to 2006 for 6 seasons, and then again in 2011 for the show's final season. Joe Rogan got his first major role in a movie in 2011 when he starred in Zookeeper. He then moved back to television shows in 2013 when he hosted the Joe Rogan's Questions Everything show on the Sci-Fi Network. Joe Rogan's acting and comedy gigs have earned him some eye-watering paychecks. His shows usually sell out at 80%, and with an average ticket price of $60, Rogan earns around $17 million from them. He even has a few shows on Netflix, who are known to pay handsomely. UFC. Rogan's love for kickboxing and martial arts led him all the way to the Ultimate Fighting Championship, but not as an athlete. When he joined the company, he was a backstage and post-fight interviewer. His first interview goes all the way back to UFC 12 in 1997. Rogan's days as an interviewer for the UFC led to him becoming friends with the UFC president, Dana White. White asked Rogan to become a commentator for the company, but Rogan wasn't interested at first. But in 2002, White finally convinced him to take the job. The first 15 fights, Rogan got paid in tickets. He wanted event tickets for his friends and himself, and that's why he took the job. He must have enjoyed the experience because after those 15 gigs, Rogan agreed to be paid for the job, with actual money this time. Even today, Joe Rogan is one of the most popular commentators in the UFC. He earns around $50,000 for each event he covers. That is roughly $2 million a year. And it looks like we're going to be hearing his voice for a long time, considering the fact that he's won Wrestling Observer Newsletter Award for Best Television Announcer twice and was named MMA Personality of the Year 4 times by the World MMA Awards. Podcast. Apart from being a popular commentator and a career in acting, Rogan decided to use his experience to start his own podcast. In 2009, Rogan launched a free podcast on Ustream with his friend Ryan Redban. The podcast was just the two talking about random things, and a new episode aired each week. In 2010, the podcast was named The Joe Rogan Experience. In the same year, iTunes labeled the podcast as the top 100 best podcasts. The popularity of Rogan's new venture grew, and in 2011, it was picked up by SiriusXM. The show has seen a number of celebrity guests, including Miley Cyrus, Robert Downey Jr., and the dead man walking, The Undertaker. Rogan invites his guests to speak about current world affairs and other topics, with many controversial opinions coming to light. In 2020, Spotify approached Rogan, and he ended up signing a deal worth $100 million for a reported 3 years. Spotify has exclusive rights to the Joe Rogan Experience, but there are still a few of his episodes on YouTube, which are still accumulating views. So Rogan earns around $30 million from just being in Spotify, and that's excluding his earnings from YouTube. And that's not all the benefit he gets from his podcast. With the fame his podcast has racked up, he also has a number of well-paying sponsors. With over 200 million downloads every month and an estimated $20 CPM, or cost per thousand, he earns roughly $48 million from the sponsors. That is a lot of cash for a podcast. On it. And don't take this the wrong way, Joe Rogan also spends his fortune. He does what every businessman does best: invest. Rogan is a co-owner of the health and fitness company Onnit, of which he owns 50%. The company provides supplements, healthy food, and fitness equipment. With a person like Joe Rogan as the face of the brand, the company has generated millions in sales each year. Rogan's share in that sum is around $2 million. Before we move on with the video, we'd love to know, how would you spend all that money? Would you carefully invest it, or would you complete everything on your bucket list? Let us know your opinions in the comments below. Continuing with Joe Rogan spending his millions. Personal life. Of course, Joe Rogan spends a lot of money on himself. He first coughed up $2.2 million in 2003 when he bought a house in Bell Canyon. After spending years in the house, he moved to a $5 million home in the same area and sold his first home for $3.2 million. In 2020, he left LA and moved to Texas, where he bought a 10,000 plus square foot estate for $14.4 million. His next big splurge is his garage, which is full of beautiful cars. He owns a custom 1965 Corvette Stingray that costs $125,000, a 2014 Ford Mustang, a Toyota Supra Mark IV, a 1964 Bronco, a $69,900 BMW M3, and a $300,000 Porsche 911 GT3 RS. And most recently, he purchased a $100,000 Tesla Model S. A fitness freak for most of his life, you can bet Rogan spends a lot of keeping himself in shape. One of his millionaire purchases is of exotic meats, which cost $18 to $19 per pound. He also spends thousands in supplements and even has a 14,000 square foot recording studio, which comes with his private gym and sauna. But perhaps Rogan's weirdest and most dangerous purchase is of firearms. Joe Rogan has stated he is pro-guns, and his collection of firearms is reportedly massive. One of the guns he owns is an FN509 Compact, which costs more than $1,000. Some of his firearms can also be seen laying around in his podcasts. And with that, we have reached the end of our video on how rich Joe Rogan is. The American millionaire has gone from having a troubled childhood to one of the richest celebrities out there. If you've watched till the end, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your post notifications. If you like this video, check out this next one, and we will catch you all next time.